She couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled as she lifted her blouse, the silk slipping from her shoulders in the shadowy penthouse suite. The man before her watched with cold gray eyes that held storms she couldn't name, his jaw tight with something between rage and desire. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to pay her father's debt with service, with labor, with anything but this. But the Mafia boss stepped closer, his voice rough as gravel. You saved my life tonight. Now I'll take yours in a different way. Her heart shattered and ignited at once, a terrifying recognition flooding through her body. This dangerous man who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist would become her obsession, her salvation, and the one who'd never let her go. Welcome, besties. Please like, share, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. 5 hours earlier, the rain hammered against the cracked windows of St. Joseph's Shelter on the south side of Chicago. The building sagged like a broken promise, paint peeling in gray strips from the walls, fluorescent lights flickering overhead with a dying buzz that echoed through empty corridors. This was where people came when they'd run out of choices. Mia Sullivan sat on a narrow cot in the women's dormitory, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white from tension. She was 26 years old with dark auburn hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, skin pale from too many sleepless nights, and hazel eyes that still carried a stubborn spark despite everything life had thrown at her. She wore jeans torn at the knees, not from fashion but from use, and an oversized gray sweater that swallowed her curvy frame. 3 months ago, Mia had been a graphic designer with her own apartment in Lincoln Park. 3 months ago, her father Patrick Sullivan had been alive. Now she was homeless, broke, and drowning in a debt she didn't even know existed. Her father had borrowed $500,000 from Dante Moretti, the underboss of the Moretti crime family, one of Chicago's most ruthless mafia organizations. Patrick Sullivan died of a heart attack 2 weeks after the loan came due, leaving his daughter with nothing but a funeral bill and a threat delivered by men in black suits. Pay what your father owed, or we take it from your flesh. Mia had sold everything. Her car, her furniture, her laptop, her grandmother's jewelry. She'd scraped together $23,000. Dante Moretti had laughed in her face. That's pocket change, sweetheart. You've got 2 weeks to find the rest, or you belong to us. Now those 2 weeks were up. Mia stood from the cot and walked to the small cracked mirror hanging on the wall. She barely recognized herself anymore. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her cheekbones stood out sharper than before. She'd lost weight, too much weight, from skipping meals and walking the streets looking for work no one would give her. But she wouldn't cry. She was done crying. A voice called from the doorway. Mia Sullivan. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair stood there holding a clipboard. Someone's here to see you. Mia's heart dropped into her stomach. She knew who it was. She followed the woman down the hallway, each step feeling like walking toward execution. In the dim lobby, 2 men waited. They wore expensive black suits that didn't belong in a place like this. One was tall and lean with a scar running down his left cheek. The other was shorter, thick with muscle, his knuckles tattooed with symbols Mia didn't want to understand. Time's up, princess, the scarred man said, his voice flat and emotionless. Boss wants to see you. Now. Mia swallowed hard. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But where would she go? Who would help her? She nodded and followed them out into the rain. They led her to a black SUV with tinted windows parked at the curb. The shorter man opened the back door and gestured for her to get in. She climbed inside, the leather seat cold beneath her. The door slammed shut. The engine roared to life. They drove through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, heading north toward the Loop. Mia watched the city blur past the window, lights smearing in the downpour. Her mind raced. What would they do to her? Would they kill her? Sell her? Make her disappear like her father's debt had made her life disappear? 20 minutes later, the SUV pulled up in front of the Moretti Tower, a gleaming skyscraper of steel and glass that dominated the skyline. Mia was escorted through a private entrance, past security guards who didn't even glance at her, into an elevator lined with mirrors that made her look small and terrified from every angle. The elevator climbed to the 40th floor. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse suite that looked like it belonged in a different world. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Black marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Leather furniture sat arranged around a fireplace where flames crackled softly. And there, standing by the window with his back to her, was Dante Moretti. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired, still broad-shouldered and powerful. He turned when she entered, dark eyes cold as winter. "Mia Sullivan." His voice was smooth, cultured, dangerous. "You're late. I'm here now." Mia forced herself to stand tall, to meet his gaze even though every instinct screamed at her to run. Dante studied her for a long moment, then gestured to a chair. "Sit." She sat. He walked over to a bar in the corner and poured himself a glass of whiskey. "He didn't offer her anything. Your father was a fool," Dante said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "He gambled everything on a business deal that fell through. He begged me for money, promised he'd pay me back in 3 months. I gave him 6. He died anyway." Mia said nothing. What could she say? "I could kill you," Dante continued, his tone conversational. "I could make you work in one of my clubs until you've earned back every cent. I could sell you to someone who'd use you and throw you away. But I won't." Mia blinked, shock flooding through her. "Why not?" "Because you're going to do something for me instead." Dante set his glass down and pulled a folder from his desk. He opened it and turned it toward her. Inside was a photograph of a man. He was younger than Dante, maybe late 30s, with sharp features, cold gray eyes, and black hair swept back from a face that looked carved from stone. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that made Mia's breath catch. "This is Alonzo Moretti. My nephew. He's the head of the Moretti family now. I stepped down last year to let him take over. He's brilliant, ruthless, and he's dying." Mia's eyes snapped up. "Dying?" Dante nodded. 6 months ago, Alonzo was poisoned by a rival family. The toxin damaged his liver beyond repair. He needs a transplant, but he refuses to go on the donor list. He says he won't accept charity. He's a stubborn bastard, just like his father. Mia stared at the photograph, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "What does this have to do with me?" "You're going to save his life," Dante said simply. "How?" Mia whispered. "Alonzo has a rare blood type. AB negative. You're AB negative too. I had you checked when your father first came to me." Mia's blood ran cold. "You want me to give him my liver?" "Part of it," Dante corrected. "A living donor transplant. You'll recover fully in a few months. He'll live. Your debt will be erased. Everyone wins." Mia felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Dante's voice hardened. "You have 2 choices, Mia. Agree to the surgery and walk away free, or refuse and spend the rest of your very short life regretting it." Mia looked down at the photograph again. Alonzo Moretti stared back at her, those gray eyes cold and distant. A man she'd never met. A man who ruled the underworld with violence and fear. And she was supposed to cut herself open to save him? "I need time to think," she said, her voice shaking. "You have until midnight." Dante replied. "My men will take you back to the shelter. Think carefully, Mia. This is the only offer you're going to get." Mia was escorted back to the SUV, back through the rain, back to the shelter where she sat on her cot staring at the cracked ceiling. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. She didn't want to do this. She didn't want to give a piece of herself to a monster. But what choice did she have? If she refused, Dante would destroy her. And if she agreed, at least she'd be free. At 11:45 p.m., Mia made her decision. She called the number Dante had given her and told them she'd do it. The next morning, a car arrived to take her to a private hospital on the outskirts of the city. She was checked in under a false name, taken to a sterile white room, and prepped for surgery. The doctors explained the procedure in clinical terms she barely understood. They told her the risks: infection, bleeding, organ failure, death. She signed the consent forms with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. 3 days later, Mia woke up in a recovery room with a scar across her abdomen and pain radiating through every nerve. A nurse told her the surgery had been successful. Alonzo Moretti was stable. She'd saved his life. Mia spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering. No one visited her. No one called. She was alone with her pain and the strange hollow feeling that she'd given away a part of herself to a man who didn't even know her name. On the day she was discharged, a man in a black suit handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note written in sharp, slanted handwriting. "You saved my life. I don't forget debts. Alonzo." Mia stared at the note, her heart pounding. She thought that was the end of it. She thought she'd never see Alonzo Moretti again. She was wrong. 2 months passed. Mia used the money to rent a small studio apartment in Pilsen. She found work at a coffee shop, started rebuilding her life piece by piece. She told herself she was fine. She told herself the surgery was just a bad memory. But sometimes, late at night, she'd wake up from dreams where gray eyes stared at her with an intensity that made her skin burn. One evening in early December, Mia was closing up the coffee shop when the door opened. She looked up, ready to tell whoever it was that they were closed. The words died in her throat. Alonzo Moretti stood in the doorway. He was taller than she'd imagined, at least 6'2", wearing a black wool coat that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. His face was exactly like the photograph, sharp and cold, but in person there was something else. Something dark and magnetic that pulled at her like gravity. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him, and looked at her with those storm-gray eyes.
"Mia."
His voice was deep, rough, like gravel wrapped in silk. "I've been looking for you." Mia's hands trembled as she set down the cloth she'd been using to wipe the counter. "Why?" "Because I owe you more than money." Alonzo moved closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You gave me part of yourself. That's not something I take lightly." "I don't want anything from you," Mia said, her voice barely steady. "I did what I had to do."
"I know."
Alonzo stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. "But that doesn't change the fact that I'm alive because of you. And now I need to repay that debt." "You already did." Mia gestured weakly. "The check." Alonzo's jaw tightened. "Money isn't enough." "Then what do you want from me?" Mia whispered, her heart racing. Alonzo stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. "Stay safe, Mia. Chicago's a dangerous city, especially for someone like you." And then he was gone. Mia stood there, her legs weak, her mind reeling. What the hell just happened? The next day, strange things started to occur. When Mia went to pay her rent, the landlord told her it had already been paid for the next 6 months. When she tried to buy groceries, the cashier said her bill had been covered. When her car broke down, a mechanic showed up at her door with a tow truck and refused to take payment. Someone was watching over her. Someone was taking care of her. And Mia knew exactly who it was. 2 weeks later, Mia found a package outside her apartment door. Inside was a phone. It rang the moment she picked it up. "Hello." Her voice was cautious. "It's me." Alonso's voice sent a shiver down her spine. Why are you doing this? Mia demanded. Because I want to. Because you matter. I don't even know you. Mia shot back, frustration rising. You will. Alonso replied, and there was something possessive in his tone that made her pulse quicken. I'm not some charity case you can throw money at, Mia said, anger giving her courage. I know. Alonso's voice softened. You're the woman who saved my life. And whether you like it or not, that makes you mine to protect. The call ended. Mia stared at the phone, her emotions a tangled mess of fear, anger, and something else she didn't want to name. Over the next month, Alonso's presence in her life became impossible to ignore. He sent flowers to the coffee shop. He had groceries delivered to her apartment. He made sure she was safe, watched over, cared for. But he never showed up again in person. It was like he was everywhere and nowhere at once. Mia tried to hate it. She tried to resent him for inserting himself into her life without permission. But deep down, a part of her felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Protected. Wanted. Seen. Then one night, everything changed. Mia was walking home from work, the streets dark and empty, when she heard footsteps behind her. She quickened her pace. The footsteps quickened too. Fear spiked through her. She broke into a run. A hand grabbed her arm and yanked her into an alley. She screamed, but a palm clamped over her mouth. You're coming with us, princess. A rough voice hissed in her ear. Suddenly, the man holding her went flying backward, slammed into the brick wall with a sickening crack. Mia stumbled, gasping for air, and looked up to see Alonso Moretti standing there, his face a mask of cold fury. He moved like a predator, fast and lethal. The second attacker lunged at him with a knife. Alonso caught his wrist, twisted, and the man screamed as the blade clattered to the ground. Alonso drove his fist into the man's face, once, twice, until he crumpled unconscious. The first man tried to crawl away. Alonso grabbed him by the collar and hauled him up, slamming him against the wall. Who sent you? Alonso's voice was deadly quiet. The man whimpered. I don't know. I swear. We were just hired to grab her. Alonso's eyes narrowed. Wrong answer. He threw the man aside like garbage and turned to Mia. She was shaking, her back pressed against the alley wall, her eyes wide with shock. Are you hurt? Alonso demanded, his hands gripping her shoulders. Mia shook her head, unable to speak. Alonso exhaled, some of the tension leaving his body. Come on. We're leaving. He took her hand and led her out of the alley to a sleek black car parked at the curb. He opened the door for her, and she climbed inside, still trembling. Alonso slid into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb, the engine purring smoothly. Where are we going? Mia finally found her voice. Somewhere safe. Alonso's jaw was tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Someone just tried to take you, Mia. That means you're not safe anymore. They drove in silence through the city, the lights blurring past the windows. Mia's mind was racing. Who would want to kidnap her? Why? Finally, Alonso pulled up in front of a massive estate on the edge of Lake Michigan. The gates opened automatically, and they drove up a long driveway lined with trees. The house was a fortress, all stone and steel and glass, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. Alonso parked the car and came around to open her door. This is your home? Mia asked, staring up at the imposing structure. For now, it's yours too, Alonso said, offering his hand. Inside, the house was just as intimidating. Marble floors, high ceilings, expensive art on the walls. But there was something cold about it, something lonely. Alonso led her to a guest room on the second floor. You'll stay here tonight, he said, his voice gentler now. We'll figure out what's going on tomorrow. Mia turned to face him. Why are you doing this? Because I can't let anything happen to you. Alonso's gray eyes held hers, and for the first time, she saw something raw in them. Something vulnerable. You saved my life, Mia. Now I'm going to save yours. That night, Mia lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. She could hear the faint sounds of the house settling, the distant hum of security systems. And somewhere in this massive, lonely place, Alonso Moretti was awake too, thinking about her. The next morning, Mia woke to find breakfast waiting for her on a tray. Fresh fruit, pastries, coffee. She ate alone in the guest room, feeling like a prisoner in a gilded cage. When she ventured downstairs, she found Alonso in his study, sitting behind a massive desk covered in papers and laptops. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. Warmth, maybe. Or possession. Sleep well? He asked. As well as I could. Mia replied, crossing her arms. Are you going to tell me what's going on? Alonso leaned back in his chair. Last night's attack wasn't random. Someone knows you're connected to me, and they're trying to use you to get to me. Who? Alonso's expression darkened. I have enemies, Mia. A lot of them. It could be any number of people. So I'm bait. Mia's voice was bitter. No. Alonso stood and walked around the desk toward her. You're under my protection. No one is going to touch you. I don't want to be a part of this world. Mia said, her voice breaking. I just want my life back. You can't go back. Alonso stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Not anymore. The moment you saved me, you became part of this. And I'm not going to let you go. Mia looked up at him, anger and fear and something else warring inside her. You don't own me. No. Alonso's voice dropped to a rough whisper. But I will protect you. Whether you like it or not. Days turned into weeks. Mia stayed at Alonso's estate, unable to leave, unable to go back to her apartment or her job. She was a bird in a cage, fed and cared for but never free. And yet, as time passed, something shifted between them. Alonso was different than she'd expected. Yes, he was cold and ruthless with his enemies. But with her, he was careful. Gentle, even. He brought her books when she was bored. He made sure she had everything she needed. He sat with her at dinner and listened when she talked about her life before all this chaos. And Mia found herself watching him too. The way his jaw tightened when he was angry. The way his eyes softened when he looked at her. The way his hands, so capable of violence, were impossibly gentle when they brushed against hers. One evening, as they sat in the library by the fireplace, Mia finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why do you care so much? What do you mean? Alonso looked up from the book he'd been reading. About me. Mia pressed. You could have just paid off my debt and forgotten I existed. Why didn't you? Alonso was silent for a long moment, the firelight casting shadows across his face. Because when I woke up from that surgery, the first thing I felt was your heartbeat. Mia's breath caught. What? The doctors told me later. Alonso continued, his voice low. When they transplanted part of your liver into me, our blood mixed. For a few minutes, our hearts beat in sync. I could feel you, Mia. And I haven't been able to stop feeling you since. Mia stared at him, her heart pounding. That's not possible. I know. Alonso set his book aside and stood, crossing the room to where she sat. But it's true. You're inside me now. Part of you is keeping me alive. And I can't let you go. He knelt in front of her, his hands resting on the arms of her chair, caging her in. I don't know how to explain it, but you matter to me in a way no one else ever has. Mia's hands trembled as she reached out and touched his face, her fingertips tracing the sharp, line of his jaw. This is insane. I know. Alonzo leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for just a moment. But I don't care. Mia didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was him. But suddenly, his lips were on hers, rough and desperate and impossibly warm. She gasped, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. Alonzo groaned against her mouth, his hands gripping her waist, lifting her from the chair and pressing her back against the bookshelf. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, frantic. Mia's body was on fire, every nerve singing with need. Alonzo's hands roamed over her curves, possessive and worshipful all at once. Mia! He breathed her name like a prayer, his lips moving down her neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin there. She arched into him, her fingers digging into his shoulders. This was madness. This was dangerous. This was everything she shouldn't want. And yet she couldn't stop. Alonzo carried her upstairs to his bedroom, kicking the door shut behind them. He laid her down on the bed, his body covering hers, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with restraint. Mia looked up at him, this dangerous, complicated man who had turned her world upside down, and nodded. "I'm sure." What happened next was a blur of heat and breathless need, of whispered words and tangled limbs, of a connection so intense it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. When it was over, Mia lay curled against Alonzo's side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The heart that beat because of her. Alonzo's arm was wrapped around her, holding her close, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her skin. "I'm not letting you go," he murmured into her hair. "Ever." Mia wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that this couldn't work, that they were too different, that his world was too dangerous. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, she didn't want him to let her go either. The next morning, Mia woke to an empty bed. Panic flooded through her. Had he left? Had he regretted what happened? She threw on one of Alonzo's shirts and hurried downstairs. She found him in the kitchen, standing by the window with a phone pressed to his ear, his expression dark. "I don't care what it takes. Find out who ordered the hit and bring them to me." He ended the call and turned to see Mia standing there. His expression softened immediately. "You're awake. Where did you go?" Mia's voice was small, vulnerable in a way she hated. "I had to make some calls." Alonzo crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you." Mia buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent. "What's happening?" "We have a lead on who tried to take you," Alonzo said grimly. "I'm going to handle it. You're not leaving me here." Mia pulled back to look up at him. "It's too dangerous." "No." Mia's voice was firm. "I'm not sitting around waiting to be a victim. If someone's after me, I deserve to know who and why." Alonzo stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fine. But you stay close to me. Always." 2 hours later, they were driving through the industrial district on the south side of Chicago. Alonzo's men had tracked the attackers to an abandoned warehouse. The car pulled up outside, and Alonzo turned to Mia. "Stay in the car. Lock the doors. If anything happens, call this number." He handed her a phone. "I'm serious, Mia. Do not get out of this car." She nodded, her heart pounding. Alonzo and 4 of his men entered the warehouse. Mia watched through the tinted windows, her hands clenched into fists. Minutes passed. Then she heard it. Gunshots. Mia's blood turned to ice. She grabbed the door handle, but before she could open it, a figure appeared at her window. It was a man she didn't recognize, holding a gun. "Get out," he ordered, his voice muffled through the glass. Mia's hands shook as she unlocked the door. The man yanked it open and grabbed her arm, dragging her out of the car. "Where do you think you're going?" a cold voice said from behind them. The man spun around, and Mia saw Alonso standing there, his gun raised, his face a mask of lethal calm. "Let her go." Alonso's voice was deadly quiet. "Or I'll put a bullet in your skull." The man hesitated, then shoved Mia toward Alonso and ran. Alonso caught her, steadying her, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No." Mia gasped. "I'm okay." Alonso exhaled, relief flooding his features. Then his expression hardened. He turned and fired a single shot. The man who'd grabbed Mia crumpled to the ground. Mia flinched, her eyes wide. Alonso holstered his gun and pulled her into his arms. "I told you to stay in the car." His voice was rough with emotion. "I'm sorry," Mia whispered, her body shaking. "I heard the gunshots and I panicked." Alonso held her tighter. "It's over now. You're safe." But Mia knew it wasn't over. Not really. Whoever wanted her dead was still out there. Back at the estate, Alonso called a meeting with his inner circle. Mia sat quietly in the corner of his study, listening as he and his men discussed their options. "It's the Rossi family," one of the men said, a grizzled older man with a scar across his cheek. "They've been trying to move in on our territory for months. They think taking the girl will weaken you." Alonso's jaw tightened. "Then they're wrong." He looked across the room at Mia, his eyes burning with intensity. "No one touches her. We hit them hard and fast. Send a message." The meeting ended, and Alonso's men filed out. Mia stood and walked over to him. "You're going to war because of me," she said quietly. "I'm going to war because they threatened what's mine." Alonso pulled her close, his hands framing her face. "You're not just some pawn in this, Mia. You're everything." Mia's breath hitched. "How can you say that? We barely know each other." "I know enough." Alonso's thumb traced her lower lip. "I know that you're brave. That you're stubborn. That you saved my life when you didn't have to. And I know that I'm never going to let anyone hurt you." The war with the Rossi family erupted over the next 2 weeks. Mia stayed locked inside the estate, watching the news reports of shootings and explosions across the city. She knew Alonso was out there, risking his life, and the fear gnawed at her constantly. But every night, he came home to her. Bruised, exhausted, but alive. And every night, they fell into each other's arms, desperate and hungry, as if they could hold back the violence of the outside world just by being together. One night, Alonso came home with blood on his shirt. Mia's heart stopped when she saw him. "Are you hurt?" She rushed to him, her hands running over his chest, searching for wounds. "It's not mine." Alonso caught her hands, stilling them. "I'm fine." Mia looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep watching you leave and not knowing if you'll come back." "Then don't watch." Alonso pulled her into his arms. "Trust that I'll always come back to you." "But what if you don't?" Mia sobbed against his chest. "What if one day you don't come home? Then you'll know that my last thought was of you." Alonso tilted her face up, his eyes fierce. "You're the only thing that matters, Mia. The only thing worth fighting for." He kissed her then, deep and possessive, and Mia let herself believe him. The turning point came 3 days later. Alonso's men captured the head of the Rossi family, a man named Vincent Rossi. They brought him to the estate, bound and bloodied. Alonso stood over him in the basement, his expression cold. "Why did you go after her?" Vincent spat blood onto the concrete floor. "Because you care about her. And that makes you weak." Alonso's fist connected with Vincent's jaw, snapping his head back. Wrong answer. Upstairs, Mia paced the living room, her nerves frayed. She knew what was happening down there. She knew Alonso was capable of terrible things, but she also knew he was doing it to protect her. When Alonso finally came upstairs, his knuckles were bruised and bloody. Mia didn't ask what happened. She just took his hands and led him to the bathroom, where she cleaned the blood away in silence. "I'm sorry you have to see this side of me," Alonso said quietly as she wrapped his hands in gauze. "I'm not." Mia met his eyes. "I know who you are, Alonso. And I'm not afraid." Something shifted in his gaze, something raw and vulnerable. "I love you." Mia's breath caught. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and real. "Say it again," she whispered. "I love you, Mia." Alonso pulled her into his arms. "I've loved you since the moment I woke up and felt your heartbeat inside me." Tears spilled down Mia's cheeks. "I love you too." And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be completely, utterly consumed by another person. The war ended a week later. The Rossi family was dismantled, their leaders dead or imprisoned. Chicago's underworld shifted, and Alonso Moretti's power grew even stronger. But none of that mattered to Mia. What mattered was that Alonso was alive, that they were together, that somehow, against all odds, they'd found each other. One evening, as they sat on the terrace overlooking the lake, Alonso turned to her. "Marry me." Mia's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me," Alonso repeated, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a diamond ring that sparkled in the fading light. "I don't want to spend another day without knowing you're mine in every way that matters." Mia stared at the ring, her emotions overwhelming. "This is crazy." "I know." Alonso's lips curved into a rare smile. "But we've been crazy from the start." "Say yes, Mia." Mia looked into his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had haunted her dreams, and nodded. "Yes." Alonso slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, slow and deep and full of promises. They were married a month later in a private ceremony at the estate. No crowds, no press, just Alonso's closest men and a priest who asked no questions. Mia wore a simple white dress that Alonso couldn't stop staring at. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Alonso kissed her like he was claiming her soul. That night, as they lay tangled together in bed, Mia traced the scar on her abdomen where they'd taken part of her liver. "Does it hurt?" Alonso asked, his fingers following hers. "Not anymore," Mia whispered. "Now it just reminds me of you." Alonso kissed the scar, then moved up to capture her lips. "You gave me life, Mia. Now I'm going to spend the rest of mine making sure you never regret it." 6 months later, Mia stood in the bathroom of their bedroom, staring down at the pregnancy test in her hands. 2 pink lines. She was pregnant. Her hands shook as she walked into the bedroom where Alonso was reading a report. He looked up when she entered, his expression immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Mia's voice trembled. "Everything's perfect." She held up the test. Alonso's eyes widened. He set the report aside and crossed the room in 3 strides, taking the test from her hands and staring at it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "We're having a baby," he breathed. Mia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Alonso pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you so much." "I love you too." Mia clung to him, her heart overflowing. The months that followed their wedding were a strange kind of paradise. Mia learned to navigate the dangerous world Alonso ruled with an iron fist. She attended meetings where men spoke in code about shipments and territories. She learned which questions to ask and which silences to keep. And through it all, Alonso was beside her, his hand always finding hers under the table, his eyes always checking to make sure she was safe. Mia discovered that being the wife of a mafia boss came with its own set of challenges. There were social obligations she'd never imagined. Charity galas where she had to smile and make small talk with women who looked at her with thinly veiled contempt because she hadn't been born into their world. Business dinners where every word had to be carefully chosen because a single slip could be interpreted as weakness. And always, always, the constant awareness that people were watching, judging, waiting for her to fail. But Mia was stronger than they gave her credit for. She'd survived homelessness, debt, and a life-threatening surgery. A few society women with sharp tongues were nothing compared to what she'd already endured. Alonzo watched her navigate these waters with pride. He'd chosen well. Mia wasn't just beautiful. She was intelligent, resilient, and capable of holding her own in a world that chewed up and spit out the weak. One particularly tense dinner with the heads of the other families, Mia had diffused a potential conflict with a well-timed joke and a gracious smile. Afterward, as they drove home, Alonzo couldn't stop looking at her. "What?" Mia asked, noticing his gaze. "You were incredible tonight." Alonzo reached for her hand. "The way you handled Salvatore when he tried to provoke me. You're a natural." "I just said what needed to be said." Mia shrugged, but her cheeks flushed with pleasure at his praise. "You did more than that. You reminded everyone in that room that you're not just my wife. You're a force to be reckoned with." But the underworld was never truly peaceful. 3 months after their wedding, a new threat emerged. The DeLuca family, one of the oldest Mafia organizations in Chicago, had been watching Alonzo's rise to power with growing resentment. Their patriarch, Marco DeLuca, was a man in his 70s with connections that stretched across the country. And he wanted what Alonzo had. The DeLuca family had been powerful once, controlling most of Chicago's South Side. But in recent years, their influence had waned. Younger, more aggressive families like the Morettas had taken over their territories, cutting into their profits. Marco DeLuca saw Alonzo not just as competition, but as a personal insult. A young upstart who didn't respect the old ways, who didn't pay proper tribute to those who'd come before. Marco wanted to put Alonzo in his place, and he was willing to spill blood to do it. One evening, as Mia was getting ready for bed, Alonzo came into their room with a grim expression. "We have a problem." Mia set down her brush and turned to face him. "What kind of problem?" "Marco DeLuca is calling for a sit-down. He wants to negotiate territory lines." Alonzo's jaw was tight. "But I don't trust him." "Then don't go," Mia said immediately, fear creeping into her voice. "I have to." Alonzo crossed the room and took her hands. "If I refuse, it's a sign of weakness. And weakness gets you killed in my world." Mia's grip tightened on his hands. "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." Alonzo's voice was firm. "It's too dangerous." "I don't care." Mia's eyes blazed with determination. "I'm your wife, Alonzo. Where you go, I go." They argued for an hour, but in the end, Alonzo relented. He knew that stubborn look in Mia's eyes. She wasn't going to back down. The meeting was set for the following night at a neutral location, an upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of downtown that had been closed for a private event. Alonzo and Mia arrived with 6 of his most trusted men. Marco DeLuca was already there, seated at a long table with his own entourage. He was a small man with silver hair and cold black eyes that missed nothing. When he saw Mia, those eyes narrowed. "Alonzo Moretti." Marco's voice was raspy from decades of smoking. "I see you brought your new bride. How charming." Mia felt Alonzo tense beside her. "Marco, this is my wife, Mia. She's here because I want her here." Marco's thin lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Please, sit." They sat across from each other at the table, tension thick in the air. Waiters brought wine and appetizers that no one touched. "Let's get to business," Marco said, leaning back in his chair. "You've been expanding aggressively, Alonzo. taking territory that doesn't belong to you. Those territories were unclaimed. Alonso's voice was calm but edged with steel. I followed the rules. The rules, Marco repeated, his tone mocking. The rules are that you show respect to those who came before you. You're young, ambitious, but you're overstepping. Alonso's eyes never left Marco's. What do you want? I want the docks, Marco said simply. The shipping routes you control. Give them to me, and we can avoid any unpleasantness. The docks were Alonso's most profitable operation. Giving them up would cripple his empire. Not happening, Alonso said flatly. Marco's expression darkened. Then you're making a mistake. I don't make mistakes. Alonso leaned forward. But you do. You think you can intimidate me because you're older, because you have history. But times have changed, Marco. And so has power. Marco's face turned red with fury. You arrogant little bastard. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? Someone who's about to lose everything. Alonso stood, his hand going to Mia's arm to help her up. This meeting is over. You'll regret this, Marco hissed. We'll see. Alonso guided Mia toward the door, his men forming a protective circle around them. But before they could leave, Marco called out one more time. Nice wife you have there, Moretti. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Alonso froze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He turned slowly, his expression so deadly that even Marco's men shifted uncomfortably. If you ever threaten her again, Alonso's voice was barely above a whisper but filled with such violence that Mia shivered. I will burn your entire family to the ground. Marco laughed, but it sounded forced. Tough words. We'll see how tough you are when your world comes crashing down. They left the restaurant in tense silence. In the car, Mia reached for Alonso's hand. He's not going to let this go. I know. Alonso's jaw was tight. That's why we need to move first. What does that mean? Mia asked, though she already knew the answer. It means war. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Alonso fortified the estate, doubled security, and moved his most valuable assets to secure locations. Mia watched him work, saw the weight of leadership pressing down on his shoulders. She wanted to help, to ease his burden, but she didn't know how. One night, unable to sleep, Mia found Alonso in his study, hunched over maps and reports. She walked in quietly and wrapped her arms around him from behind. Come to bed, she whispered against his neck. I can't. Alonso's voice was strained. There's too much to do. Then let me help. Mia moved around to face him. Tell me what you need. Alonso looked up at her, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. I need you safe. That's all I need. Mia cupped his face in her hands. I am safe. Because I'm with you. Alonso pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her hair. Sometimes I wonder if you'd be better off without me. Never. Mia's voice was fierce. Don't you ever think that. You're everything to me, Alonso. Everything. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and she kissed him back with all the love and fear and hope she carried inside her. The attack came 3 days later. Mia was in the garden, tending to the roses she'd planted, when she heard the first gunshot. Her blood turned to ice. She dropped the pruning shears and ran toward the house. Security alarms blared. Men shouted. More gunshots echoed through the air. Alonso appeared at the door, his face grim. Get inside. Now. Mia didn't argue. She ran past him into the house, and he slammed the door shut behind her. Through the windows, she could see figures moving through the grounds. DeLuca's men. They'd come for Alonso. Stay in the safe room, Alonso ordered, pressing a key into her hand. Don't come out until I come for you. No. Mia grabbed his arm. I'm not hiding while you're out there. You don't have a choice. Alonso's eyes were hard. If something happens to you, none of this matters. Please, Mia. Do this for me. Mia saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she felt, and nodded. Be careful. Always. He kissed her once, quick and fierce, then disappeared into the chaos. Mia ran to the safe room, a reinforced chamber hidden behind a bookshelf in Alonso's study. She locked herself inside and sank to the floor, her heart pounding. The sounds of battle raged outside. Gunfire. Shouting. Breaking glass. Mia covered her ears and prayed. Minutes felt like hours. Then, suddenly, silence. Mia's hands shook as she reached for the door. Should she open it? What if it was a trap? Before she could decide, she heard footsteps in the study. Heavy, deliberate. Her breath caught. The bookshelf moved. The safe room door opened. And there was Alonso, covered in blood but alive. Mia launched herself into his arms, sobbing with relief. You're okay. You're okay. I'm okay. Alonso held her tightly. It's over. They're gone. What happened? Mia pulled back to look at him. We drove them off. Alonso's voice was grim. But they'll be back. We need to end this. That night, Alonso called his most trusted men together for a war council. Mia sat beside him, refusing to be excluded. We hit them where it hurts, Alonso said, his finger tracing a map of Chicago. The DeLuca family has 3 main operations. Their gambling ring in the South Loop, their smuggling operation at the docks, and their money laundering front in the financial district. We take all 3 in one night. It's too risky. One of the men, a grizzled veteran named Sal, shook his head. They'll be expecting retaliation. Good. Alonso's eyes were cold. Let them expect it. We'll give them something they can't defend against. Over the next week, Alonso's men prepared for the strike. They gathered intelligence, mapped out routes, acquired weapons. Mia watched it all, her stomach twisting with anxiety. The night before the operation, Alonso came to bed late. Mia was waiting for him, unable to sleep. He slid under the covers beside her, and she immediately curled into his side. Promise me you'll come back, she whispered into the darkness. I promise. Alonso's arms tightened around her. What if you can't keep that promise? Then know that I died protecting what matters most. His voice was rough. You. Tears slipped down Mia's cheeks. I can't lose you. You won't. Alonso tilted her face up, his eyes burning into hers. I will always find my way back to you. Always. They made love that night with a desperation that spoke of fear and hope and unbreakable devotion. And when Mia finally fell asleep in his arms, she dreamed of a future where they were safe, where they were free, where love was enough. The operation was launched at midnight. Alonso's men moved like shadows through the city, hitting all 3 targets simultaneously. The gambling ring was raided, the money seized. The smuggling operation was destroyed, the shipments confiscated. And the money laundering front was exposed, leading to federal investigations that would cripple the DeLuca family for years. But it came at a cost. 2 of Alonso's men were killed in the fighting. 3 more were wounded. And Alonso himself took a bullet to the shoulder during the raid on the docks. He didn't tell Mia until it was over. She only found out when he came home at dawn, his shirt soaked with blood, his face pale from blood loss. Oh my God! Mia rushed to him, her hands shaking as she tried to assess the damage. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you go to the hospital? I needed to see you first. Alonso's voice was weak. Needed to know you were safe. You're an idiot. Mia's voice broke as she helped him to the couch. A stubborn, reckless idiot.
I know.
Alonzo managed a faint smile. But I'm your idiot. She called a doctor she trusted, one of Alonzo's men who had medical training. He arrived within 20 minutes and worked quickly to remove the bullet and stitch up the wound. Alonzo gritted his teeth through the pain, refusing anesthesia, his eyes never leaving Mia's face. When it was done, the doctor left them alone. Mia sat beside Alonzo on the couch, her hand gripping his uninjured one. You could have died, she whispered. But I didn't. Alonzo squeezed her hand. Because I had something to live for. The war with the DeLuca family continued for another month. It was brutal, bloody, and relentless. But slowly, Alonzo's superior tactics and resources began to tip the scales. Marco DeLuca's empire crumbled piece by piece. His allies abandoned him. His men defected. And finally, Marco himself was cornered. Alonzo brought Mia with him to the final confrontation. It took place in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city, the same place where this whole nightmare had begun. Marco DeLuca was bound to a chair, his face bruised and bloodied, his expensive suit torn and dirty. When he saw Alonzo walk in with Mia at his side, he spat blood onto the concrete floor. Come to gloat, Moretti? I came to end this. Alonzo's voice was cold. You threatened my wife. You attacked my home. You killed my men. There's only one way this ends. Marco laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Kill me then. Get it over with. Alonzo pulled out his gun and aimed it at Marco's head. But before he could pull the trigger, Mia stepped forward. Wait. Alonzo looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes.
Mia.
Don't. Mia looked at Marco, this old man who had caused so much pain and suffering, and felt nothing but pity. If you kill him, it never ends. There will always be another family, another enemy, another war. Alonzo's jaw tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying there has to be another way. Mia turned to face him fully. You're not just a killer, Alonzo. You're a leader. Show him mercy. Show everyone that you're strong enough to break the cycle. Alonzo stared at her for a long moment, conflict warring in his eyes. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. Marco looked stunned. You're letting me live? Alonzo's voice was deadly quiet. I'm letting you live because my wife asked me to. But if you ever threaten her again, if you ever come near my family again, mercy won't save you. Understand? Marco nodded weakly. Good. Alonzo turned to his men. Take him to the airport. Put him on a plane to Italy. Make sure he never comes back. As Marco was dragged away, Alonzo pulled Mia into his arms. You're too good for this world. He murmured against her hair. Maybe. Mia looked up at him. But you're the one who makes me want to be better. They left the warehouse together, hand in hand, and Mia knew that something had shifted. Alonzo had chosen mercy over vengeance. And in doing so, he'd chosen the kind of man he wanted to be. The weeks that followed were peaceful in a way Mia had never experienced. With Marco DeLuca gone and his family in disarray, the city settled into an uneasy truce. Alonzo used the time to consolidate his power, to build alliances instead of burning bridges. And slowly, the violence that had defined his life began to fade. Mia watched him change. The hard edges softened. The cold distance in his eyes warmed. He smiled more, laughed more. And every night, he came home to her, whole and safe. One evening, as they sat on the terrace, overlooking the lake, Mia felt a familiar wave of nausea wash over her. She'd been feeling off for a few days, dismissed it as stress from the constant tension of their lifestyle. But now, as the nausea intensified and she noticed other signs, her missed period, the tenderness in her breasts, the exhaustion that seemed to seep into her bones, realization dawned with startling clarity. She stood abruptly, her hand going to her stomach. Alonzo looked up from the business report he'd been reviewing. Everything okay? I need to. Mia's voice trembled. I need to go inside for a minute. She hurried to the bathroom before he could ask questions. Her hands shook as she dug through the cabinet, looking for the pregnancy test she'd bought weeks ago on a whim. She'd told herself it was just in case, that she wasn't really expecting anything. But some part of her had known. Some instinct had whispered the truth. Alonzo appeared in the doorway just as she was opening the box. His eyes went to the test in her hands, and understanding flooded his features. Mia, I think. Mia leaned against the sink, her hands shaking. I think I might be pregnant. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and fear and hope. Alonzo crossed the bathroom in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. His heart was pounding against her ear, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. How long have you suspected? He asked, his voice rough. A few days. Mia admitted. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to get our hopes up if I was wrong. Alonzo pulled back to look at her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Let's find out. Together. They took the test together, Mia's hands shaking so badly that Alonzo had to steady them. And when those 2 pink lines appeared, the world seemed to stop. Alonzo stared at the test, then at Mia, then back at the test. A slow smile spread across his face, the most genuine smile Mia had ever seen. We're having a baby. He breathed, wonder filling his voice. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. Hey there, little one. I'm your dad. And I promise I'm going to protect you and your mom with everything I have. Mia ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Mia suffered from severe morning sickness for the first 3 months, the kind that left her weak and dehydrated, unable to keep down even water some days. Alonzo was there for every moment of it, holding her hair back when she was sick, bringing her crackers and ginger tea that sometimes helped and sometimes didn't, staying up late when she couldn't sleep because the nausea was too overwhelming. He became obsessively protective in a way that was both endearing and occasionally frustrating. He hired a full-time nurse to be on call 24/7. He baby-proofed the entire estate months before the baby would even be mobile. He read every parenting book he could get his hands on, taking notes like he was preparing for the most important business deal of his life. He banned certain foods from the house because he'd read they might be harmful. He made sure Mia took her prenatal vitamins at the exact same time every day. He researched the best obstetricians in Chicago and flew in a specialist from New York for a second opinion on everything. Mia, I love you, but you're driving me crazy. She told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from walking up the stairs by herself. I can walk, Alonzo. I'm pregnant, not broken. I know. His jaw was tight with worry. But what if you fall? What if something happens? Then you'll be right there to catch me. Mia cupped his face in her hands. You can't protect me from everything. I can try. Alonzo's voice was fierce. You and this baby are everything to me, Mia. If something happened to either of you, I wouldn't survive it. She kissed him then, soft and reassuring. Nothing's going to happen. We're fine. I promise. But she understood his fear. After everything they'd been through, after all the violence and danger and loss, the idea of losing this precious gift terrified her too. And when Mia's belly started to swell with their child, when the evidence of new life became visible for everyone to see, Alonzo's wonder only grew. He would spend hours just talking to the baby, his hand pressed against Mia's stomach, telling stories about their family, making promises about the future. He spoke in Italian sometimes, the language of his childhood, words Mia didn't always understand, but that sounded like music. He told the baby about the estate, about the lake, about all the places they would go together. He promised to teach them to swim, to fish, to appreciate good food and good wine when they were old enough. He promised to protect them from the darkness of his world, to give them the childhood he'd never had. And Mia would listen, her heart overflowing with love for this man who had once seemed so cold and distant, but who had revealed depths of tenderness she never could have imagined. The underworld noticed the change in Alonzo Moretti. The ruthless mafia boss who had once ruled with fear and violence was becoming something else. A family man. Some saw it as weakness. Others saw it as evolution. But no one dared challenge him. Because even as Alonzo softened, there was still steel beneath the surface. And everyone knew what happened to those who threatened his family. 6 months into the pregnancy, Mia started feeling the baby move. She was in bed one night when the first flutter happened. She grabbed Alonzo's hand and pressed it to her belly. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Alonzo went very still, his eyes widening as he felt the tiny movement beneath his palm. "That's our baby." His voice cracked with emotion. "That's our baby saying hello." They spent the rest of that night with Alonzo's hand on Mia's belly, feeling every kick and movement, talking about names and nurseries and all the dreams they had for their child. "I want to be a good father," Alonzo said quietly as they lay in the darkness. "I want to give our child everything I never had. Safety, love, a chance at a normal life. You will be." Mia turned to look at him. "You already are." The last trimester was the hardest. Mia was huge, uncomfortable, and terrified of labor. Alonzo was equally terrified but tried to hide it for her sake. He attended every doctor's appointment, asked a million questions, and made sure Mia had everything she needed. Then, 2 weeks before her due date, Mia's water broke. It was 3 in the morning. She woke to a warm gush and immediately panicked. "Alonzo." Her voice was tight with fear. "Alonzo." He was awake instantly, his hand going to her shoulder. "What's wrong?" "My water broke. The baby's coming." Alonzo went into action mode. He called the hospital, got Mia dressed, helped her into the car. His hands were steady, his voice calm, but Mia could see the fear in his eyes. "It's going to be okay," he kept saying as they drove through the dark streets. "You're going to be okay." Labor lasted 14 hours. It was the longest, most painful 14 hours of Mia's life. Alonzo stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. When the pain became unbearable, she screamed at him. "This is your fault. I'm never letting you touch me again." "I know." Alonzo kissed her sweaty forehead. "I'm sorry. I love you. I hate you." Mia gasped through another contraction. But Alonzo just smiled because he knew she didn't mean it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor said the words Mia had been waiting for. "One more push. You're almost there." Mia bore down with everything she had, and then, suddenly, there was a sound. A cry. A beautiful, perfect, healthy cry. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, squirming baby covered in blood and vernix. Mia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but overwhelmed with joy. Alonzo was crying, actual tears streaming down his face as he stared at his daughter. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's absolutely perfect." The nurse cleaned the baby and handed her to Mia. The moment Mia held her daughter, the moment she looked into those tiny eyes, everything changed. All the pain, all the fear, all the struggles. It was all worth it for this. Alonzo sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Mia, his other hand gently touching the baby's tiny fingers. "What should we name her?" Mia asked softly. "Kate," Alonzo said without hesitation. "After the life that was lost and the love that was found." Mia looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "Kate. It's perfect." They named her Kate Audrey Moretti. A blend of the past and the future. A symbol of everything they'd overcome and everything they'd become. The first few weeks with Kate were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and overwhelming love. Alonzo was a natural father. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floors at 2 in the morning when Kate was fussy, and stared at his daughter with such adoration that it made Mia's heart swell. One night, Mia woke to find Alonso's side of the bed empty. She got up and followed the sound of soft singing to the nursery. Alonso was standing by the window, Kate cradled in his arms, rocking her gently as he sang an old Italian lullaby. Mia stood in the doorway, her heart overflowing. "You're going to spoil her," she said softly. Alonso turned, a smile on his face. "That's the plan." Mia walked over and wrapped her arms around both of them. "I love you," she whispered. "Both of you. So much. I love you too." Alonso kissed her forehead, then Kate's. "More than anything in this world." As Kate grew from a newborn into an infant, Mia watched Alonso transform completely. The man who had once ruled the Chicago underworld with ruthless efficiency was now attending parent-baby classes, reading bedtime stories, and making silly faces to get his daughter to smile. He stepped back from many of his business operations, delegating more to his trusted lieutenants. He wanted to be present for Kate's milestones, for her first smile, her first laugh, her first word. And when Kate was 6 months old and said her first word, "Dada," Alonso broke down in tears. He scooped her up and held her close, his shoulders shaking with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this," he told Mia later that night as they lay in bed. "A family. A real family. I thought my life would always be violence and darkness. But you changed everything. You changed too." Mia traced her fingers along his jaw. "You chose to be better. For us. And I'll keep choosing it," Alonso promised. Every single day. On Kate's first birthday, they threw a small party at the estate. Just close friends and family. Mia had baked a cake, Kate's first taste of sugar, and they watched as their daughter smashed it with her chubby little hands, getting frosting everywhere. Alonso took 1,000 pictures, his face lit up with pure joy. Mia stood back and watched her family, this family she never thought she'd have, and felt a peace settle over her. They'd been through hell. They'd faced danger, betrayal, violence, and death. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something beautiful out of the ashes. That night, after Kate was asleep and the house was quiet, Alonso pulled Mia onto the terrace. The city lights glittered below them like scattered diamonds. "Thank you," he said, his arms wrapped around her from behind. "For what?" Mia leaned back against his chest. "For everything. For saving my life. For loving me. For giving me Kate. For showing me that there's more to life than power and fear." Mia turned in his arms to face him. "You saved me too. You know that, right? When I had nothing, when I was broken and lost, you gave me a reason to keep going." Alonso cupped her face in his hands. "We saved each other." And they had. Two broken people who found healing in each other's arms. Two lost souls who found home. As the years passed, their family grew. Kate was joined by a brother, Marco, named after Mia's father, but with a chance to live a better life than his namesake. And then another daughter, Sophia. The Moretti children grew up surrounded by love, protected by their father's power but never exposed to its darkness. Alonso made sure of that. He'd built legitimate businesses to fund their lifestyle, slowly moving away from the criminal enterprises that had defined his youth. He became a philanthropist, using his wealth to fund hospitals and schools and shelters. He became the man Mia had always seen beneath the violence. The man with a good heart who'd been forced into a dark world but chose to find his way out. And through it all, Mia was by his side. His partner. His equal. His love. 20 years after that first surgery, Mia stood in the same hospital where she'd given part of her liver to a stranger. But this time, she was there for Kate's college graduation party. Their daughter had become a doctor, choosing to save lives just as her mother had saved her father's. Alonso stood beside Mia, his hair gray now but his eyes still that same stormy color. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining automatically. "We did good," he said softly, watching Kate laugh with her siblings. "Yeah." Mia squeezed his hand. "We did. Do you ever regret it?" Alonzo asked. "Giving up your liver? Saving a mafia boss you didn't even know?" Mia turned to look at him, this man who had become her entire world. "Never. Not for a single second. Because that stranger became my husband, my best friend, the father of my children, my everything." Alonzo pulled her close and kissed her, the same way he'd kissed her on their wedding day, on the day Kate was born, on 1,000 ordinary days in between. And Mia kissed him back, tasting salt from happy tears, tasting love and devotion and an unbreakable bond. They'd started with blood and sacrifice, but they'd built something eternal. A love story written in scars, and sealed with promises kept. A family forged from darkness but shining with light. And as they stood there, surrounded by their children and the life they'd created, Mia knew that every moment of pain, every sacrifice, every terrifying choice had led her exactly where she was meant to be. In the arms of the man who loved her with a fierce, unshakable devotion. The man whose heart beat in rhythm with hers. Forever.